This is probably the biggest case of the term, and some people have said this is the biggest case in decades.
Wow.
Because it's going to determine the president's authority. So this is about the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA for short. And no president has used this to impose tariffs. It doesn't mention tariffs or duties in the language, but President Trump is saying that he can exert emergency power. So what the statute does say is that in unusual and extraordinary circumstances, a president can declare an emergency. Okay. Still not a question of whether it can be about tariffs, because that's supposed to be something that Congress does. So President Trump said that on one hand, the fentanyl crisis and then the deficit, the trade deficit, are extraordinary emergencies. And so the question is whether the Supreme Court will agree with that. 3 lower courts, including the International Court of Trade, which is known to know about trade, said, no, this is not, the president can't do this. And, you know, there are briefs that groups submit called amicus briefs. And in this case,
well, I've been mispronouncing it my whole life.
I know, me too.
People also say amicus.
Okay,
So,
you're the expert.
No, well, I'm not a Latin expert. I haven't taken Latin since high school, and that was a long time ago. So, but there were 40 briefs against the tariffs and 10 for. And among the 40 were like the Chamber of Commerce, small businesses, law professors, former judges. So, I mean, if you look at the text, the Supreme Court should probably rule against the tariffs, but as we know, they often rule the way they want to rule.
And he did appoint a number of the Supreme Court justices, so there's
3.
that to consider as well. Exactly.
Yes.
So who exactly are the plaintiffs? Because it feels like this got rolled up into one big case.
Yeah. So the plaintiffs right now are small businesses. There is a wine exporter. There is a toy goods company. And, you know, they're basically, and I believe that they had a sort of a draw for which lawyer was going to argue, and Neil Katyal, who was the acting Solicitor General. By the way, I think his hourly rate is up to $3,000 an hour.
Nice.
Yes, nice.
Yes.
If you're him, I believe he's going to argue for the plaintiffs, and the Solicitor General is on the other side, and he's won many a case for Donald Trump before the Supreme Court, even before he was president.
So the Supreme Court will hear arguments today. When will they issue a ruling, do you think?
That's the $1 million, or maybe the $1 trillion question in this case.
Right.
So it's expected that because they put this on an expedited schedule, this was on the emergency docket, and they switched it over to this docket. They have it called a special day for this. So it's expected that they'll rule quickly, but you never know. So the worst comes to worst, it would be the end of the term in June. It probably won't be that late, but you know, if there are conflicting, if there were like dissenting opinions and concurring opinions, it can take a while.
Mm-hmm. So what happens today is that the Supreme Court begins hearing arguments on this. How long is that part of the process going to take?
It's probably going to be 2 hours. It used to be that Supreme Court arguments were an hour, and they had a clock and a light. And
that's what I remember from TV and movies.
You were out, right? Now they can go on. It could go on longer than 2 hours. So you know, it'll be interesting to see what the justices ask questions about, and the responses. And President Trump had said he was going to attend the hearings, and every lawyer I talked to said, "Bad idea, bad idea." And now I think it's just Scott Bessent who's at the hearings.
Now, we know President Trump doesn't give up a fight easily, and he is a very litigious person, always has been through his business career. If he loses at the Supreme Court, is that it for tariffs?
Well, it's not it for tariffs. It's it for tariffs under IEPA, because the Supreme Court is as high as you can go, as you all know. So, but there are other ways that he can implement tariffs, and he has implemented tariffs in other ways. And apparently, the administration is looking for other things. So it's not the end. The question is whether they'll have to reimburse businesses for some of the tariffs that they've paid.
How do you do that?
That will not be fast or easy. That's going to be a process.
It would be a process. I mean, it's been done before in smaller amounts, but that'll not be another question. And that's sort of hanging over the Supreme Court's head, because Donald Trump has been saying that it's the life and death of the country. I mean, he's been saying some extraordinary things about the importance of this case, and that's going to be weighing on the justice's mind somewhere in the back, I think.
Yeah, Paul, according to Bloomberg Economics, the U.S. is collecting $556 million daily in IEPA tariffs.
Ooh, okay.
And by the end of 2025, it'll top $140 billion. Can you imagine trying to refund that?
Yes.